The cold night. The night on the frozen planet was harsh. The wind howled through the barren landscape, sending icy gusts that made the soldier shiver in his small tent. Inside, he was wrapped in a thick blanket, trying to keep the warmth in, but it didn't help much. The cold was biting, sharp, and relentless. He had learned to endure it, but even he couldn't ignore the chill in his bones. The soldier, named Jason, sat near a small fire in the center of the tent. The flames flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. His uniform was still stiff from the cold, and his fingers felt numb. He'd been stranded here for days, after a malfunction left his ship in pieces on the surface. He had no contact with his team, no way to call for help. The planet was hostile, a place where even the hardiest of soldiers would struggle to survive. Jason knew he had to make the most of the little supplies he had left. His food rations were low, and his water supply was nearly gone. The only thing that kept him going was a small fire, the warmth from it providing a brief sense of comfort. Outside, the wind continued to rage. He stared into the fire, lost in thought, wondering how long it would take before his situation became truly desperate. He had no idea how long he could survive out here alone. The thought made him feel uneasy, but he shook it off. He was a soldier. He was trained for this. Suddenly, a soft noise outside the tent caught his attention. It wasn't the wind, it was something else. Jason tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. His heart raced. Was it an animal? Or something worse? He stood up slowly, keeping his movements quiet, careful not to make a sound. He moved towards the entrance of the tent, his boots crunching lightly on the frozen ground. As he approached, the sound grew louder, almost like footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, but they didn't sound like any creature he'd encountered on this planet. Jason hesitated. Who would be out here in this freezing wasteland? His mind raced. Could it be another human? Maybe another soldier from his team who had gotten separated, or perhaps an alien. The thought made him uneasy. He'd heard stories of strange beings on this planet, creatures that were dangerous and unpredictable. Some of his fellow soldiers had been sent to investigate, but none had returned. Jason's instincts told him to be careful, to stay inside, and wait for whatever was outside to leave. But then the soft noise came again. This time, it was closer. Almost too close. With a deep breath, Jason unzipped the tent flap, his eyes narrowing as he looked into the dark, snow-covered landscape. The wind blew the snow in all directions, making it hard to see anything. But then, through the swirling snow, he saw something. A figure. A person. No, it couldn't be. There was no way someone could survive out here without proper protection. The figure moved closer, stumbling through the snow. Jason's heart skipped a beat as he realized it was a woman. She was dressed in strange, shimmering clothing that didn't look like anything he had ever seen before. It didn't seem to protect her from the cold, though. She was shivering, her body hunched as if she could barely stand. Jason's mind raced. Was she human? Or was she something else? She looked fragile, like she had been walking through the storm for hours. He could see her breath coming out in heavy clouds, her skin pale and covered in frost. She was in danger, but something about her seemed different. Without thinking, Jason rushed outside, his boots crunching loudly in the snow. He approached the woman carefully, keeping his weapon ready just in case. But when he got closer, he saw her collapse to the ground, her body unable to take any more of the cold. She hit the snow hard, and Jason's heart lurched in his chest. He couldn't just leave her there to die. He knelt beside her, checking her pulse. Weak, barely a beat. His mind raced. He had to act quickly. He couldn't leave her out in the cold, but he also couldn't risk bringing a potential threat into his tent. The stories he had heard about this planet were enough to make anyone cautious. But in the end, it was his humanity that won. The soldier was trained to help those in need, even in the most dangerous situations. Jason carefully lifted the woman into his arms, cradling her as if she were a child. He could feel the cold seeping into his own body as he carried her, but he pushed it aside. He had to get her inside the tent before it was too late. With every step, the weight of the situation pressed on him. Who was this woman? And why was she out here alone in such extreme conditions? Was she an enemy, or was she someone who had been abandoned just like him? Jason didn't have the answers. All he knew was that he couldn't let her die in the snow. He made it back to the tent, breathing heavily, and gently laid her down on the ground. As he removed his gloves and began to work on warming her up, he noticed her strange appearance more closely. Her skin was not the same color as a human's, and her features were sharp, almost alien. He didn't have much time to think about it. He grabbed his emergency heat packs and placed them near her body, trying to get some warmth into her frozen limbs. The soldier worked quickly, his mind spinning with questions. An unlikely guest. The woman's body trembled as she lay there, unconscious but alive. Jason's hands moved quickly as he unzipped his survival pack, pulling out a few more heat packs and blankets. The fire in the corner of the tent crackled softly, offering some warmth, but it wasn't enough for the alien woman. She was still too cold, her body stiff with frost. Jason's breath fogged in the air as he worked, but he couldn't focus on the cold anymore. His attention was entirely on her. The fact that she was alive and had somehow managed to make her way across this icy wasteland stunned him. She wasn't human, that much was obvious. Her skin shimmered in the dim light of the tent, almost like it had a metallic sheen, and her facial features were sharp, like they belonged to a different species entirely. Her eyes, if he ever got the chance to see them, were the most alien thing about her. They were hidden now, her face covered in frost and grime. Jason shook his head, trying to focus. Questions flooded his mind. Who was she? What was she doing here? But for now, he had to get her warm. There would be time for answers later. The minutes dragged on as Jason carefully rubbed her limbs with a cloth, trying to bring some life back into them. His movements were gentle, almost hesitant. It was strange. He was used to treating soldiers, not strangers, definitely not alien women in his tent in the middle of a freezing storm. But his instincts kicked in. He had seen death before. He knew what it looked like. He wouldn't let her die in front of him. Her chest rose and fell shallowly, and Jason let out a quiet sigh of relief. At least she was breathing. But he couldn't let his guard down completely. Even unconscious, she was a mystery, a dangerous unknown. Jason stepped back for a moment, taking in the sight of the alien woman in front of him. The small fire crackled between them, the heat from it barely reaching her cold form. Her strange clothes, once glittering with what appeared to be some kind of high-tech fabric, were now torn and tattered, leaving her exposed to the elements. Her face was still hidden beneath strands of ice-covered hair, but her features were unmistakable. He had never seen anything like her. His eyes narrowed. Was she from a rival alien species? Had she been sent to spy on him, or worse, to kill him? Jason shook his head, trying to rid himself of those thoughts. For now, she was just a person in need, a person who was lucky to be alive at all. He moved across the tent, grabbing his last water ration. He uncapped it and gently dribbled a bit of the cool liquid onto her lips, hoping to revive her enough for her to drink. Her mouth twitched, but she didn't respond. He tried again, this time holding the bottle to her lips. This time, there was a slight reaction, a low moan, barely audible, but enough for him to know that she was still conscious, at least on some level. Then her eyelids fluttered. For a moment, Jason froze, unsure what to expect. Would she lash out in fear or anger? Would she see him as a threat? Her eyes opened slowly, revealing two glowing silvery orbs. For a brief second, Jason felt a chill run down his spine. They weren't human eyes. There was something unnatural, something almost predatory about them. The woman blinked, confused at first. Her gaze shifted around the tent, taking in her surroundings. She shifted slightly, trying to push herself up, but Jason quickly placed a hand on her shoulder, urging her to stay still. No, you need to rest, Jason said, his voice gentle but firm. He could tell that she wasn't fully aware of her situation yet. She looked at him, her expression blank. Then she spoke, her voice weak, but carrying an accent he couldn't place. "Where am I?" she asked, her tone low, barely a whisper. Jason hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to answer. She wasn't human. He could tell that now, but should he tell her the truth? That she was on a frozen planet far from home, trapped with a stranger? Or would that make things worse? He couldn't risk alarming her, especially when he still didn't know whether she posed a threat. "You're safer now," Jason replied, trying to keep his voice calm. "This is my tent. You've been injured. You need to rest and warm up." She blinked again, her gaze sharp as she studied him more closely. Her eyes seemed to glow brighter now, as if they were absorbing the light around her. "I am not dead." Her words came slowly, as though she was trying to process them, like the idea of being alive didn't make sense. Jason's heart skipped. He wasn't sure what kind of being she was, but there was something profoundly different about her. Her calmness in the face of near death was unsettling. "No," he said softly, "you're not dead. You're alive, but you need to stay still. It's dangerous out there." Her gaze didn't leave him. There was something in her eyes that unsettled Jason, something ancient, something he couldn't quite understand. It wasn't just curiosity or gratitude, it was something darker. She shifted slightly, looking at the heat packs and blankets surrounding her. "You are human," she observed, her voice still weak, but now laced with something that sounded like recognition. "I was wrong about you." Jason raised an eyebrow, a bit confused. "Wrong about me? What do you mean?" The woman's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing more. Instead, she just watched him. Her eyes seemed to pierce through him as if trying to read him, trying to figure him out. Jason felt the weight of her stare. It wasn't hostile, but it was intense, unlovingly so. And as the minutes ticked by, he realized that she wasn't just cold. There was something about her, something that made him feel as though he was standing on the edge of something dangerous, something he didn't fully understand. Her presence, her silence, was as chilling as the wind outside. But for now, she was alive, and Jason had no choice but to take care of her. What happened next would change everything. A dangerous connection. The alien woman lay silently in the corner of the tent, her eyes closed again as if resting. But Jason knew she wasn't fully asleep. Her strange, glowing eyes flickered beneath her eyelids every so often, and he could feel her awareness, even though she wasn't speaking. He wasn't sure what to make of her, and the uncertainty gnawed at him. It had been several hours since he had found her outside, frozen and barely alive. The heat packs he used on her had done their job, and her body temperature was starting to rise. But even as she regained strength, something in the air felt off. Jason couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just some lost survivor he had stumbled upon. There was more to her than he could understand. The wind outside howled louder now, the snowstorm intensifying. Jason poked at the fire in the center of the tent, the only source of warmth and light. It crackled and sparked, its flames dancing in a way that felt both inviting and ominous. The fire, like the woman, was unpredictable. As the hours passed, Jason couldn't help but steal glances at her. He didn't know who she was or where she came from, but her presence in his tent was a constant reminder that he was no longer alone, and he wasn't sure if that was a good thing. She shifted suddenly, breaking his thoughts. Jason's hand instinctively moved to the weapon at his side, but she didn't make any threatening moves. Instead, she sat up slowly, her movements deliberate, almost cautious. Her glowing eyes found his immediately, locking onto him with an intensity that sent a chill through him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Jason didn't know what to say, and frankly, he wasn't sure if he should. Everything about this situation felt wrong, but there was something else too, a strange kind of pull, as if they were both drawn to each other by forces they didn't understand. "I owe you my life," the woman said softly, her voice clear but distant. It was the first full sentence she had spoken since she had awoken. Jason's brow furrowed. I wasn't about to let you die out there, he replied, trying to keep his tone neutral. But his words felt hollow in the silence of the tent. She nodded slowly, as if weighing his words. You are not like the others, she murmured, almost to herself. You didn't leave me to freeze. Most would. Jason felt a flicker of confusion. The others? What do you mean? Who are you? Where are you from? She stared at him for a long time, her eyes studying him with such intensity that Jason felt as though she could see into his very soul. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Jason could almost hear his heart beating faster. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying a hint of sadness. I am not from this world. Jason blinked, surprised by her answer. I figured as much. She didn't laugh or smile. Instead, she looked down at her hands, her long, slender fingers trembling slightly. I am from a far-off place, a place you would call an enemy, a place where your kind is the enemy. Jason's stomach tightened, his mind raced. Enemy. He had been trained to fight against many things, hostile creatures, dangerous environments, but an alien enemy wasn't something he had expected to face. He didn't know if she meant to threaten him, or if she was just stating a fact. Why are you here? Jason asked, his voice steady but his body tense. I was sent to eliminate you. All of you, she replied, her voice distant, as though she was speaking of something far removed from herself. But I was abandoned, left behind, alone on this frozen world. I thought I would die here. Jason couldn't hide the shock on his face. She was here to kill humans. His first instinct was to reach for his weapon, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the exhaustion in her voice or the look in her eyes. Something vulnerable, something human. It didn't add up. He stood up slowly, pacing around the small tent. So, you're an assassin, sent to kill me, kill us. His words were sharp, but a part of him, a small part, felt a strange curiosity about her story. She didn't flinch. Instead, she watched him with those glowing eyes. I was trained for it. It was my mission. She hesitated, her voice quieting. But the mission doesn't matter anymore. I don't know what to believe anymore. Jason stopped pacing, looking at her. So you're just giving up? After everything? After coming all this way? The alien woman's eyes flickered briefly, and for a moment, Jason thought he saw something like regret, or was it guilt? But the expression vanished quickly, replaced by a mask of indifference. I was a soldier too, she said, her tone cold now. I followed orders. I believed in my cause. But I was abandoned, left to die, just like the others before me. And now I wonder, was it all worth it? Jason felt his pulse quicken. Her words were heavy, filled with something Jason hadn't expected, doubt. She didn't sound like an enemy now. She sounded lost. Just like him, stranded on a frozen planet with no way home. He shook his head. So, what now? Are we supposed to just sit here and talk about it? Wait for the cold to take us both? Her eyes flickered again, and this time, there was a flicker of something more, curiosity maybe. Her lips parted slightly, and Jason thought she might say something. But before she could, there was a sudden thud against the tent. Jason's heart leaped into his throat. The alien woman stood instantly, her body coiling like a spring. Her eyes burned brightly now, and Jason could see the tension in her limbs. She looked ready to fight, faster than he could react. Something was out there. The wind howled again, but this time there was a new sound. A scraping, like claws against ice. The hairs on the back of Jason's neck stood up. He reached for his weapon, his breath catching in his throat. The woman turned to him, her voice sharp. There's no time. We need to move now. Jason didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. The moment she said those words, he knew they were no longer just two strangers in a tent. Something was coming, and it was dangerous. The door to the tent shook, and the world outside seemed to close in around them. They had to survive together. The enemy approaches. The tension in the tent was palpable. Jason's heart pounded in his chest, the sound of it so loud he could almost hear it over the howling wind outside. The alien woman's eyes glowed fiercely, scanning the entrance of the tent, her body tense and ready for action. She was no longer the fragile, weakened being he had found just hours ago. Now she was a predator, alert and focused, as if every instinct within her screamed to survive. Jason stood frozen for a moment, watching her. Despite the fear coursing through him, he couldn't help but feel a surge of admiration for her. There was something about her strength, something raw and untamed. She was a warrior, no doubt about it. Without a word, she moved toward the entrance of the tent, her steps soundless. Jason followed her, trying to steady his breathing. He reached for his weapon, a sleek, high-tech rifle that had been his constant companion during the war. He checked it quickly, loaded and ready, just in case. But even as his hands gripped the familiar rifle, a knot of unease twisted in his stomach. Something about this situation didn't feel right. The woman's voice broke through his thoughts. "They are coming. They're close." Jason nodded but didn't speak. He could feel the air outside vibrating with an energy he couldn't explain. It was as if the planet itself had gone still, waiting for something terrible to happen. He had been alone in this frozen wasteland for months, with nothing but the harsh environment and the memories of his fallen comrades. Now he was faced with an unknown enemy, and the last person he ever expected to be on his side was the alien woman. The woman, she still hadn't given him her name, moved swiftly, crouching low to the ground. Her eyes were fixed on the opening of the tent, her senses clearly heightened. Jason followed suit, trying to match her movements, but his clumsy human instincts were no match for the grace and precision she displayed. Suddenly, the sound of claws scraping against the icy ground outside pierced the silence. Jason stiffened, his grip on his rifle tightening. The sound was unmistakable. Something large and predatory was approaching. His mind raced. What kind of creatures lived on this forsaken planet? A low growl echoed from the distance. Jason's instincts kicked in, and he moved to the side of the tent, positioning himself in the shadows, out of sight. His heart thudded in his ears as the sound of the growl grew louder, closer. Whatever it was coming for them. The alien woman remained still, her eyes glowing faintly, her breath steady despite the danger. She had fought before, he could tell. She was used to this. "What are we up against?" Jason whispered, trying to keep his voice as low as possible. She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the darkness outside. Then she spoke, her voice barely a breath. "Something dangerous. We need to leave now. If they find us here, we won't survive." Jason's pulse quickened. "Who are they?" The woman's gaze snapped to him, her eyes reflecting a mix of urgency and something darker. "They are hunters. I've crossed paths with them before. They won't stop until we're dead." Jason didn't ask how she knew that, or why she was so certain. In this world, there were things far worse than he could imagine, and he didn't have time to question her. The tent flap shook again as something outside brushed against it. Jason's breath caught. He could hear the movement, the weight of whatever creature was out there pressing against the flimsy fabric. The hunter, whatever it was closing in. "We can't fight them all," Jason said, trying to think quickly. His mind raced as he searched the tent for anything that could be used as a weapon or to defend themselves. The woman gave him a quick, assessing look. "No, we can't, but we can outsmart them." Before Jason could respond, she was already moving, slipping toward the back of the tent with a grace that seemed impossible. She reached for a small pack he hadn't noticed before, quickly pulling out what appeared to be a device, sleek, compact, and unfamiliar. Jason watched as she began manipulating it with deft fingers. "What is that?" he asked, keeping his voice low. "It will create a diversion," she replied, her eyes never leaving the device. "It won't stop them, but it will buy us time." Jason nodded, his mind still racing. A diversion, that might work. But he needed more than that. He needed a way to escape, a plan that would get them off this godforsaken planet. The woman finished with the device and slid it into the folds of her clothes, giving Jason a quick, purposeful look. "Prepare yourself. We leave on my signal." Jason felt a surge of adrenaline. He had no idea what was coming next, but the urgency in her voice left no room for hesitation. He crouched low, moving toward the edge of the tent, weapon in hand, his body coiled and ready. The growl from outside grew louder, closer now. Jason could feel the presence of the creature outside, could almost sense its heavy breathing, its hunger. It was close, too close. Then, without warning, the woman activated the device. A blinding flash of light erupted from the center of the tent. Jason winced, momentarily blinded by the sudden burst. He stumbled back, disoriented for a split second, but the noise that followed, a high-pitched screech, was even more disorienting. The creature outside reacted instantly, its growl turning into a roar of confusion and anger. The sound sent a shiver down Jason's spine. "Go," the woman shouted. Jason didn't need any further urging. He darted for the tent flap, his movements quick and desperate. The alien woman was already ahead of him, her body a blur of motion as she sliced through the tent flap with a small, sharp tool, creating an opening just big enough for them to slip through. The freezing wind hit him like a slap in the face, and Jason gasped for breath as he stepped into the harsh, bitter landscape outside. The snowstorm raged around them, the wind howling, but the only thing that mattered now was survival. Behind them, the creature, the hunter, let out another scream, but it was disoriented, confused by the flash. They had a few precious moments. "Move fast," the woman urged, her voice cutting through the storm. Jason didn't hesitate. They were already in motion, running toward the distant ridge where she had pointed earlier. There was no time to think, no time to ask questions. They had to escape, before the hunters found them again. But as they ran, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whatever had been sent to kill them would stop at nothing to finish the job, and they weren't the only ones who were being hunted. He looked to his side at the alien woman, running beside him, her glowing eyes fixed ahead. She wasn't just his ally now, she was his only hope. The chase. The freezing wind whipped around Jason and the alien woman, stinging their skin with every gust. The snowstorm raged on, swirling in every direction, blurring the horizon into an endless, white void. Jason's breath came in sharp, painful gasps, the frigid air cutting into his lungs. But there was no time to slow down. Behind them, the creature's roar echoed through the storm, louder now, more furious. The hunt was on. They had been running for what felt like hours, their legs burning from the cold and the exertion. But every time Jason glanced over his shoulder, the darkness of the storm was all he could see. The alien woman was ahead of him, moving with an uncanny grace, like she was born to navigate this frozen wasteland. Jason could barely keep up. "How much further?" he gasped, his voice barely audible over the storm. The woman's glowing eyes flicked back to him, but she didn't slow down. "Keep going, just a little farther." Her voice was steady, despite the frantic pace. Jason wondered how she could remain so calm, but then again he realized this wasn't her first time being chased. Her movements were fluid, practiced. She was a survivor. She had been through worse than this. The wind howled again, and Jason squinted through the white blur, trying to make sense of the world around him. There were no landmarks, no way of telling where they were going. The storm had swallowed everything, but the woman didn't seem to need to see. She was guided by some inner compass, her feet sure and determined. Suddenly, a sound pierced the storm, a crackling, tearing noise. Jason's heart skipped. He knew that sound. It was the sound of something big, something fast, closing in on them. His grip tightened on his rifle as he turned, expecting to see the creature bearing down on them. But there was nothing, just the storm. "Move," the woman shouted, her voice urgent. She was already ahead of him, her silhouette almost lost in the snow. Jason pushed himself harder, willing his legs to go faster, but the exhaustion was beginning to catch up with him. Every step felt like lead, and his breath came in labored bursts. He didn't know how much longer he could keep this up. And then, from the corner of his eye, he saw it. A shadow, moving fast. Before Jason could react, the creature emerged from the storm, its massive, hunched form lunging at him with terrifying speed. It was a blur of darkness against the white landscape, its claws glinting in the pale light. Jason barely had time to raise his rifle before the creature was upon him, knocking him to the ground with a bone-jarring force. The wind knocked out of him as the creature's weight crushed him, its hot, rancid breath filling his nostrils. You could hear its growls, guttural and vicious, as it tried to sink its claws into his chest. Panic surged through him, but his hands scrambled for his weapon, finding it buried in the snow beside him. The alien woman was already on the attack. She moved like lightning, her hands reaching for something at her side, a sleek blade, shimmering in the storm's light. She slashed it through the air with deadly precision, her movements a blur of grace and power. The creature snarled in pain as the blade found its mark, leaving a deep gash along its side. But the creature wasn't finished. With a violent shake of its head, it threw Jason off, sending him sliding across the ice and snow. He barely managed to regain his footing before it turned its attention back to him. The woman was already between them, standing tall, her body coiled, ready for the next move. Jason could feel the heat radiating off her, even in the freezing cold. She was a force to be reckoned with. "You're not fast enough," she growled, her voice low and dangerous. "Get to the ridge. I'll hold it off." Jason's eyes widened in disbelief. "No way, we fight this thing together." Her gaze was intense, unwavering. "We don't have time to waste. You're not the one being hunted. Now go." Jason didn't argue. He had no choice but to trust her. He glanced at the creature, still circling them, its eyes burning with fury. The last thing he needed was to get caught in a fight they couldn't win. With one last look at the woman, Jason turned and ran. The wind whipped against his face, making it harder to see, but he didn't slow down. He had no choice. The alien woman was right. She could handle this. He had to get to the ridge. It was the only chance they had. Behind him, he heard the woman's voice again, fierce and commanding. "I said, go." Jason's legs moved faster, his heart pounding in his chest. The ridge was in sight now, just a few hundred yards ahead. But as he neared it, the sound of the creature's growls grew louder again, and Jason realized with a sickening feeling that it wasn't the woman's fight anymore. It was a chase, and the creature wasn't going to stop until it had them both. He glanced over his shoulder and saw the woman standing her ground, facing the creature head-on. The blade gleamed in her hand, her posture unyielding. For a moment, Jason hesitated. He wanted to help her, but he knew the best way to do that was to survive. He had to get to the ridge. The woman would hold the creature off as long as she could, buying him the time he needed to escape. The ridge was close now, so close. Jason pushed himself harder, his muscles screaming in protest, but his mind was sharp. His feet hit the frozen ground like a machine, his only focus on the rise ahead of him. And then, just as he reached the base of the ridge, something behind him exploded, a massive, ear-splitting roar. The creature's cry echoed through the storm, and Jason froze. He dared not look back. But the sound of the alien woman's voice, fierce and determined, pierced through the howling wind. "It's not over yet," she called out. Jason didn't know what that meant, but he couldn't afford to stop. The ridge was now in front of him, and he began to climb, his fingers scraping at the icy rocks, his breath coming in ragged gasps. But even as he reached the top, a chilling thought crossed his mind. Was the alien woman truly the only one who could survive the hunt? And if she was, how long would she be able to keep them both alive? The answer to that question remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. The chase had only just begun. The hidden truth. Jason's heart hammered in his chest as he crested the ridge, his breath ragged in the bitter cold. He could feel the icy wind biting at his exposed skin, But his focus was on the woman below, battling the creature that was still hunting them. He had to keep moving. He had to find a way to survive. But as he paused at the top of the ridge, something in the distance caught his eye. Movement, shadows darting between the trees far below, figures obscured by the storm. He squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Were they hunters? More of the alien creatures that had been sent after them? No, these were different. There were humans down there, 3 of them, and they were moving with purpose, each one armed and ready for battle. Jason's mind raced. Who were they? Were they here to help? Or were they just another part of the enemy's plan? The sound of claws scraping against rocks snapped him out of his thoughts. He whipped around, his rifle raised, scanning the area for the creature. But it was the woman who caught his attention. She was standing her ground against the beast, her blade flashing in the low light, her movements swift and precise. She wasn't just surviving, she was fighting back, holding her ground. Jason's pulse quickened. He had to make a choice. Help her or go after the humans. The decision was agonizing, but in the end, it wasn't much of a choice. The woman had saved him more than once already. She had proven herself as strong and capable. If he could somehow help her take down this creature, maybe they both stood a chance of escaping this hellhole. He turned and made his way back down the ridge, his steps deliberate, his movements quiet. The storm was still raging around them, the wind howling, but it didn't matter. He couldn't hear the creature anymore. All he could hear was his own breathing, ragged and loud in his ears. By the time he reached the base of the ridge, he could see the woman, still locked in combat with the creature. Its massive form loomed over her, its glowing eyes filled with malice. She was bleeding. He could see the dark streaks of red against her pale skin, but there was no sign of fear in her expression. She was determined, fierce. Jason swallowed his fear and sprinted toward her. His rifle was raised, his finger on the trigger, but just as he was about to take the shot, the woman's voice cut through the noise of the storm. No, don't shoot. Jason froze. The creature was still moving toward her, but she was looking at him now, her glowing eyes meeting his. She shook her head. You can't kill it. Not like this. We need to draw it away. Jason lowered his rifle, confused. What do you mean, draw it away? The woman's lips curled into a determined smile, but there was something else in her expression, something that made Jason hesitate. There's a way to beat it, but you have to trust me. Do you trust me? Jason swallowed, the cold air biting at his throat. His instinct was to keep fighting, to shoot the creature down, but something about her words, the way she spoke with such certainty, made him believe that there was more to this than he could understand. He nodded, though his hands were shaking and his heart was in his throat. All right, I'm in. What do we do? The woman's eyes flickered toward the creature, then back to him. I need you to create a distraction. Use the terrain, make noise, draw it away from me. Jason frowned. And then what? What happens when it's distracted? Then I finish it, she said, her voice unwavering. But you have to do your part. Jason hesitated, staring at the woman, trying to read her expression. He wanted to ask more questions, wanted to know exactly what the plan was, what she had in mind, but there was no time for that. If he didn't act now, the creature would close in on them again, and it would be too late. He took a deep breath and scanned the area. The ridge had a series of jagged rocks and snowdrifts that could be used to his advantage. He wasn't used to fighting in terrain like this, but he had to make it work. Without another word, Jason began moving, using the wind and the snow to mask his footsteps. He circled wide, staying low to the ground, keeping himself out of sight. The creature was still focused on the woman, but its eyes darted between her and the surrounding darkness, its instincts clearly on alert. Jason found a large rock upwind of the creature, and with a deep breath, hurled a chunk of ice and snow toward it. The noise was deafening, a massive crash that sent a spray of ice and snow into the air. The creature's head snapped toward the sound, its growl low and deep. It turned its massive body, eyes glowing brighter, its claws scraping the ground as it moved toward the noise. Perfect. Jason ducked behind the rock, holding his breath, praying the creature wouldn't spot him. He could feel the ground tremble with every step the creature took as it moved closer to the distraction. His pulse raced, his mind focused entirely on the moment. The woman's voice cut through the storm again. Now, move. Jason didn't hesitate. He bolted, running as fast as he could toward the ridge, toward the higher ground where he could gain the advantage. He could hear the creature behind him, but he didn't look back. He had to trust that the woman was ready, that her plan would work. The creature's growl echoed behind him, but Jason was already on the ridge, his rifle ready. He aimed for the creature's weak spot, the underbelly, knowing that his shot wouldn't kill it, but it might slow it down long enough to allow the woman to finish what they had started. Just as he was about to fire, there was a flash of movement in the distance, those same human figures he had seen earlier. They were moving toward the creature, their weapons raised, closing in on it. Jason didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. Who were these people? Were they allies or were they here for the creature? But before he could answer that question, the woman's voice rang out through the storm. Jason, take the shot now. He didn't hesitate this time. He squeezed the trigger, the rifle kicking in his hands. The shot echoed through the storm, a sharp crack that split the air. The creature let out a roar of pain. But it wasn't over yet. The creature turned toward him, its glowing eyes filled with fury. Jason's stomach dropped. He had drawn its attention, but this time the woman was ready, the final stand. The creature's eyes locked onto Jason as if it could sense the shift in the battle. Its monstrous form seemed to grow larger in the blinding storm, its growl deepening into a guttural roar that reverberated through the air. For a moment, time seemed to slow as Jason realized the full weight of what he had just done. He'd distracted the beast, but now it was coming for him. His heart raced. The rifle was still raised, but it felt too small, too weak against the force of nature that was charging at him. The wind howled louder, as if trying to drown out the madness of the moment. The creature lunged, its massive claws slicing through the air. Jason barely had time to duck as it swiped at him, missing by mere inches. He scrambled backward, heart pounding, his boots slipping on the icy ground. There was no time to reload, no time for anything but survival. And then, just as the creature was about to pounce again, a flash of movement shot across his field of vision. It was the woman. She was there, suddenly, effortlessly, her blade gleaming in the cold, slicing through the air with deadly precision. The creature howled as her strike found its mark, slashing across its chest. But the beast was far from finished. It rolled in fury, swiping at her with its claws. She danced back, fluid as water, dodging the attack just in time. Jason could see it now. The woman was playing a deadly game. She was toying with the creature, not just fighting it. She was luring it, making it overconfident, preparing for the final strike. But there was something else, something strange about the way she moved. It was as though she was waiting for something beyond just defeating the creature. Jason's pulse quickened as the realization hit him. She wasn't just fighting to survive, she was fighting to protect something. The thought flashed through his mind, and before he could second-guess himself, his eyes darted back to the ridge. The three humans he had seen earlier were still making their way toward the creature, their weapons raised. Jason's mind raced. They weren't here for the creature. They were here for her. He swore under his breath. It was a trap. She had known all along. In a split second, everything clicked. The woman's mission wasn't to survive this alien planet. She was here to stop something worse, something much bigger than either of them. And now her enemies were closing in. "Move," she shouted, her voice urgent, laced with a fierce intensity. "We need to get to the shelter, now." Jason didn't hesitate. She had given him the opening he needed. The creature was momentarily distracted, its focus on the woman's blade, and for the briefest of moments, its guard was down. Jason sprinted forward, dodging the creature's erratic movements, and grabbed the woman's arm. "Let's go," he yelled, pulling her toward a shelter. But as they started to run, the creature's roar tore through the air again, and Jason felt his stomach drop. The three humans on the ridge were drawing closer, weapons in hand. They had them surrounded. The woman's eyes narrowed, her breath coming in sharp, controlled bursts. She knew what was happening. She knew that she had little time left to finish this. "No, we can't just run." She stopped, pulling away from Jason's grip. "I have to end this." "What do you mean?" Jason asked, his voice thick with confusion and fear. "You're not planning to fight them alone, are you?" The woman didn't answer immediately. She seemed to focus on the wind, the swirling snow, as though listening to something beyond the storm. Then, in a tone that sent chills down Jason's spine, she spoke again. "They won't stop, not unless they know I'm gone. But there's one way left to destroy them all." Her eyes met his. "I can't do it without you." Jason was stunned. "What do you mean? What's your plan?" She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small silver device. It was a detonator. Jason's eyes widened. "This is a remote-triggered explosive," she explained. "I've been hiding it since we landed here. It's the only way to ensure the entire species doesn't get off this planet. The creature we're fighting is just one of many, and the rest will come for us, for the humans." Jason felt his chest tighten, his mind spinning. "You want me to help you destroy them?" "Not just them," she said, her voice cold and determined. "The whole mission, the facility, the heart of it all. We need to stop the war before it even starts." The enormity of her words sank in. It wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the future, for the fate of not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. This wasn't about just killing the creature. It was about stopping the war that had been brewing beneath the surface for far too long. Jason nodded, understanding now. This wasn't just a fight to survive. It was a fight to prevent something much worse. With a sharp breath, he grabbed her hand, and together they moved toward the shelter, a small reinforced structure hidden in the side of a mountain. The creature's growl echoed behind them, but they didn't turn back. They didn't need to. The woman had a plan, and now Jason was a part of it. They reached the shelter, and Jason quickly helped her set the device into place, connecting the wires. She worked with precision, her movements quick and confident. The explosion would be massive, capable of destroying everything in its radius. It was their last shot at stopping the enemy. As she finished, she looked at him one last time. "Are you ready?" Jason felt the weight of the question settle on his shoulders. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was certain. He had already crossed the point of no return. He nodded. "I'm ready." With a final click, the device was activated. The countdown began. The storm howled louder than ever, the wind screaming around them as they moved to take cover. And in that moment, the creature's roar erupted once more, its final attempt to claim them. But it was too late. The countdown hit 0, and the explosion shattered the silence of the frozen world. The shockwave hit them like a freight train, sending them both to the ground. The sky lit up in a brilliant flash, followed by a deafening boom. The world around them shook as the force of the blast tore through the mountain, the shelter, the battlefield. Everything they had fought for was gone. Jason's body was racked with pain as he struggled to his feet. His vision was blurry, his ears ringing, but he managed to look around. The creature was gone. The men on the ridge were gone. The storm, once so fierce, had finally started to die down, revealing the jagged remains of the battlefield. And standing next to him, the alien woman, bruised but unbroken, turned to him. "We did it," she said, her voice quieter now. "The war, it ends here." Jason looked at her, the weight of the moment settling on his chest. It was over, for now. But in his heart, he knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger, something he and the alien woman would have to face together.